Hi, everyone. My name is Neil Unglather. I'm a reporter for Fast Company magazine, and I'm here with Rob Garza and Dave Geller of Thievery Corporation. Unfortunately, Eric couldn't make it here today, but I'm very excited to be speaking with these two about music, about technology, and I'm pretty sure everyone here is familiar with Thievery's music. They'll be playing here, of course, in just a few hours. And as an electronic band, they're unusually well positioned to talk about music technology. Follow our conversation on Twitter with hashtag Techmanity. Their Twitter handle is Thievery Corp DC, I believe. And with that, I'll turn the mic over to these guys to talk a little bit, and a lot about music, technology, and the one thing that I was really curious about, how working with samples is different in 2014 when computers have pretty much taken over everything.
Thank you. First of all, we're excited to be here, although I haven't seen any manatees yet. We're still... No, we started back in 1995 in Washington, D.C., and I first met Eric. We both had a love of Brazilian music, Jamaican music, Indian grooves, and old soundtracks from the 60s. And one of the things we wanted to do is take those old sounds and incorporate it with something more modern and electronic. And so our career has sort of been built on taking all the things that we love from our record collections and kind of creating something that we are trying to create that feels timeless and, you know, has a foot in the past but also a foot into the future. And so one of the things with electronic music and technology is that it allows you to do that. I feel that with technology, especially in music, you're only limited by your imagination. So if you can imagine something, you can create it. And this allowed us, even though we didn't start off as technically real musicians, we were able to create music that people respected and loved around the world, and were able to have careers. And from that, we've actually become better musicians, better producers. And so I think technology plays a key part in all of this because it allows the expression of who we are. Even if you look at something like photography, you no longer need dark rooms and have to understand the whole process of photography, but you can take beautiful photos and express yourself through photography, and it's the same thing in music.
And while I am not Eric Hilton, I am Dave Geller, been manager of Thievery Corporation for 10 years. And I guess for me, where the rubber meets the road for technology is over this last 10 years working with a band who's traditionally been very organic in every regard, the production of their music, the promotion of their careers, and watching them embrace technology in a way that they're comfortable to bring more awareness to the music without selling it too hard, and also taking advantage of technology as it comes to the presentation of our fascinating and wonderful live show.
And one thing I'm curious about, now if you're a musician starting out, you have to use Bandcamp, you have to use SoundCloud, or you're not really noticed. And what I'm curious about, if you're a musician starting out these days, 2014, just how tech savvy do you guys think you have to be in order to get the word out?
Well, I think you have to be very tech savvy these days. When me and Eric started out, we met in a place called the 18th Street Lounge. It's in Washington, D.C., and it's this old row house that I think what Teddy Roosevelt had at one point for one of his mistresses. And it's right above this kind of mattress discount store.
Some things never change.
Some things never change. So it's like you could walk past it and not even know that it's there, and it's just kind of like this little plaque on a wall you'd have to walk up to that says 18th Street Lounge. And when we started at Thievery Corporation, we felt like we wanted it to be about word of mouth and people telling friends. And so, we were always actually trying to keep it discreet and low profile. And we've built a career, that's lasted 20 years of people just telling friends and sharing music and things like that. And so for us, it was actually a very hard step to jump into the digital world and the social media world and try to find friends because, that's not just who we are. Back in the day, musicians were almost expected to be aloof and not part of, people not to know too much about them and almost be kind of mysterious. So for us, it's kind of like a big step all of a sudden trying to be like, okay, engage social media followers and all these kind of things. But I think that, over the course of time, we have gotten into it more, but I think it's a very different world that if you're starting out as a musician, you do have to engage in Bandcamp and SoundCloud and Facebook and all these kind of things that it's almost essential at this point. And, that they are actual great tools to build followings and careers. But I think for us, it's just, we're coming from a different background, so it was a little bit strange.
For Rob and Eric to present the live show the way they want to, it's very expensive because we carry up to 20 band and crew on the road. So when you're out there talking to promoters, for better or worse, the analytics of your social media has become a pretty specific barometer. Like, okay, if I'm going to pay these guys 6 figures, there's a certain threshold of fans and likes and awareness. So, we have decided to embrace it on that level because very quickly, once we did, the guys had immediate results. And, there's really super interesting tools like the geo-targeting stuff that makes the job easier for everybody. So logic dictated some of the digital embracement while necessity dictated other parts of it.
And also, one thing is that it's kind of, as an artist, it is kind of fun to actually engage with fans and kind of connect on a more real level. So I think once you're aware and you kind of see how much people are really loving and enjoying what you're doing with the social media tools, you get very instant feedback. And for us, I think that's something that we never really understood. But, as we participated more in that it was kind of like pretty cool to just have that level of interaction.
Yeah, and when I was speaking with David on the phone earlier, we were talking about 930 Club in D.C., about the Black Cat, and the days where you leave flyers at record stores, at bars for events, and just have people show up. And now you have instant feedback from fans on Twitter, on Facebook, other venues. And for musicians, that's just a totally different world.
Yeah, it's a totally different world. Everything is different these days, I guess. There's no, like, putting the genie back in the bottle or whatever. It's just like, when we started, that's a great example, is just flyers, everyone going around and, the things that you can do just on social media and just forget all of that is just a totally different thing. But, that's what also made it fun, is just that also like human, personal connection of just meeting people on the street and giving people flyers and actually making friends face to face and things like that. So there's like 2 sides to every coin.
I think for us also, the fact that there's, 20 characters telling their story on a show-by-show or record-by-record effort, that we have content that people are interested in even when we're not making a show or making music. And I think that Rob and Eric's cause orientation, some of their political and views on the industry also make us, we have a more of a captive audience off and on cycle, and it's been fun to see the real-time interaction from it.
Rob, one thing I wanted to get your take on is you guys make this really ornate, deep, high-quality music that requires a lot of high sound quality, basically. And now a lot of musical tools rely, especially now that we're in streaming era, on lower sound quality, are sort of made for, lower quality speakers, to be very frank. Yeah. And I'm curious what your take is on musicians who create content to be made ready for Spotify or Pandora.
It is crazy because you're a musician and you're in a studio. You're like in a very like high-end studio, and you can be listening to music and recording it on this equipment that costs a lot of money, and technically it's at the high end, and you're spending all this time recording, listening over and over, back and forth, and then at the end you're like, okay, somebody's going to listen to this on their laptop speakers. And sometimes sometimes it's a bit disheartening, that you go through all this process of trying to get something to sound so good, and people are going to listen to something on it so bad. I'm 44 years old, and when I grew up, I would go to people's houses, and most of the parents had these hi-fi systems with great speakers, great amplifiers that were really meant for listening to music. And when I was a kid, you would go there, and like if you even tried to touch those stereos, the parents would smack your hands or something, And the thing is that the technology exists for music quality to be so great, but a lot of people are listening on these very cheap bedroom speakers or monitors and things like that. And that's one of the things that I wish existed, is that people just had the real appreciation of hi-fi quality in music, and how great that would be, because all of these musicians that you love, when they record these records, they want you to listen to it the way that they feel it, the way that they hear it, and record it, and so it's kind of a shame, because they're trying to share something, and a lot of people just listen on these little kind of 2-bit speakers or something.
And question, do you guys have iPads?
Yes, I do.
I don't.
Well, for iPad or for phone, what music apps have you seen that you think are really cool?
I like different synth apps, Korg. Has this MS-20 kind of thing. There's so many, just different random ones that, every time I go on there, it's kind of oh, there's something cool, and I just kind of click on it and play around with it. But, I think that that's one of the beautiful things about technology, is that we all can express our musical side, that it's not limited to someone that has serious musical talent or training, I should say, because I grew up in a town, very small town. Nobody in my family was musicians, but I got exposed to an electronic music class in 1984 when I was 14 years old. And I went there, and they had synthesizers, sequencers, modular synths, drum machines, all these kind of things. And I was exposed to it, so it isn't that I'm more talented than somebody else, but I had the access to those tools and believed that I could do it. And so that's why I'm here today. And so I think, if kids or anybody, adults, it doesn't matter how old you are, if you have the desire to express something and you have the tools to do it, you can, and that's, to me, kind of the main thing I feel about technology. When you strip it all away, it's just another tool to express who you are.
I would say from a commerce standpoint that I could see at the advent of apps like Shazam, where there's immediately able to identify who the artist, we rose with that opportunity. A lot of people were always wanted to know, well, who is that? And from music supervisors and people looking for film and television and just a variety of commerce opportunities, definitely those type of apps are impactful for us.
And from the band side, what's it like interacting with Shazam and finding out that people are checking you guys out, curious about what they heard where? We all know about using it as users, but what about being on the musician side?
Yeah, well, you never know what kind of effect you have as artists, because you just created in a studio, and you're there in a room, and it's the two of you with some other musicians, and you don't understand what kind of consequence or legacy the music you're creating is gonna have. And there's so many countless times we walk into, whether it's a hairdresser or a store or hotel, and you hear your music, and you meet, your music is almost everywhere, but at the same time you meet people and they're like, I never heard of Thievery Corporation. But a lot of people have heard it. They've heard it, but they don't know who it is. And apps like Shazam and stuff like that allow people to actually be like, oh, there's actually, an artist behind this. There's actually they have a history, they have other albums, things like that.
And normally for us, we know from the analytics that someone that detects who we are is then going to find us, listen to a bunch of stuff from us, likely to buy something. So it's been very impactful for us.
For me, the whole thing, like with our careers, it's about the slow burn. Like, to me, it's like easy come, easy go kind of thing. But we've built a career where, there were bands that were much more popular than us when we started off back in 1995. Artists have kind of faded away, but it's just kind of creating this career, creating an arch, and really loving what you do, loving your art, loving the people you work with. And it's okay to build it slow, It's like, for me, I actually relish that. And that's what makes me like feel proud to this day of where I am and where we are and what we're doing.
If the math is lost on the tech crew here, we're going to be 20 years next year. It's our 20th year. We know you guys aren't great at math. We just wanted to point that out to you.
And on the 20-year point, what tech for making music is around now that wasn't around back in the 90s that you really wish was around back when you were first getting started out?
Well, it's funny because, when I started out, it's kind of like, oh, you do electronic music. What does that mean? And it's like, today, who isn't an electronic music? If you're like a country artist like Faith Hill, you're still an electronic artist in a way because you're using Pro Tools and you're using a computer and all these things. But, now these are all things that we all take for granted, but they didn't exist that way a long time ago. And, this technology for me is just allows you to create a lot faster, a lot more intuitive. When we started, it's just like we would make a song and it would take us just so long between combining all the different technologies. Like many of you might not even know what digital audio tape is. And, using sequencers, and we didn't have multi-tracks. And my thing is, whatever technology you do have, like we had very limited things when we started out. We weren't a big studio, and we just kept trying to work whatever little bits that we had and really know the tools that you're using. And sometimes I feel that that's a lot more, it's a lot better than having 2,000 plugins that you never use and having all the technology in the world. Just whatever things that you do have, just trying to juice them and squeeze what you can out of them.
And I remember those tiny digital audio tapes from way back when. Let me ask you, someone who's not involved in the music industry, does anybody still use those?
No, nobody uses those.
And other vintage technologies that fell by the wayside, I mean, you still have like a little cassette music subculture. You still have CDs being sold in stores. And the big question is, in terms of older technologies and newer technologies, obviously turntables can be sticking around for a long time, but how do you see the interplay between the old and the new?
I don't know. I mean, this was almost like 5 years ago. I was with a group of kids, and they were part of a Smithsonian project, and they came to the studio in Washington, D.C., and they were all about like 14, 15, 16 years old, and I was handing them CDs, and they're like, what are these, basically? So it's changing, like, I mean, so sudden and so quickly that who knows, I mean, what's going to happen. I mean, and that's, in some sense, exciting, some sense scary, but, that's life at the same time.
I will say that we are releasing the entire catalog on vinyl. It actually might have been coming out today. And I'm blown away by the fanfare around the announcement, around the order base. So from, for whatever it's worth, I don't know that vinyl's making like a worldwide impactful comeback, but there's certainly a lot more people buying it than ever.
Well, you know what? One of the things that's really interesting is like if you go to studios around the world, and it's almost better to have some of these older technologies like tape or vinyl and things like that, because Pro Tools 4 existed, 10 years ago or something, and nobody really has the ability to go back and actually get them, because everybody's so focused on the future that, these old operating systems of whatever particular programs nobody has anymore once you get to a certain point, and they go way back. So I remember talking to these guys in a studio in London, and they're like, it's actually kind of cool to have it on old, reel-to-reel tape, because you can still just access it in a way without having to find a version of the program that was made 15 years ago, and then trying to, just, I don't know, get the level all the way up to that point where you can bounce it and do whatever, so.
Well, I'm excited to hear the reissues, and everyone in the audience, go out and buy 5 each of them. Rob, David, thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming. You were great.
Thank you.
Looking forward to seeing you guys at the show
Yeah.
tonight.